Today we're talking about scheduled messaging. Hopefully you're even a fraction as excited about scheduled messaging as we still are, even though it's been out for what, 2 weeks-ish? Anyway, so let me start off by just really clarifying that there are two methods of scheduling messages, and you'll utilize them at very different times. And we're going to go over both of them in today's session, but I just want to sort of make those distinct. We'll start first with how to schedule message templates, okay? So message templates. When you schedule your message templates, it allows you to save time, avoid oversights, avoid forgetting, not have to remember to generate messages because the system will auto-generate those messages for you once transactions meet specific milestones. You can set them up to do that, okay? So again, you no longer need to use tasks to help you manage which messages to send out or your memory or what have you. The system will do that for you, okay? So let's head over to our message templates area, which we get to by going to personal profile. And then you now have a message templates section, right? And underneath there, you've got manage templates. So let's go under manage templates. Now, I'm not going to go over any aspects of creating or managing templates themselves. Hollis did a great Pipeline Pro webinar last week where he dove into how to create them, the benefits of them, different examples of them, et cetera. So if you're not familiar with message templates, definitely encourage you to head over to the help site and look up Pipeline Pro recordings and check out last week's Pipeline Pro webinar. Got all of that in there. So I'm going to assume that basically your message templates exist and we're going from that point, okay? So we're on our message templates page here, which lists all of our message templates. I'm going to expand one of those, say our key dates template, so I can see all the details within there, my subject, my body, et cetera, whether I'm sharing it or not. And then now I've got this schedule template button where I can expand and view my scheduling options, okay? Now, when you schedule a message template to be triggered, you can schedule it to be triggered based on either relative to a transaction's date or whenever a particular task gets checked off on the transaction, okay? And that's an or, right? You can schedule it based on the date or a task being completed, fully completed, okay? So let's go ahead and sort of demo how to set it relative to a date on the transaction. So let's say I wanted this message to be generated whenever it's, let's say, 2 calendar days before the close date, let's say, right? And I can set that date rule, okay? Or maybe I want to set it to be due on, let's say, the acceptance date, okay? Or maybe one day after the acceptance date, right? And set that date rule, okay? And again, I can do date or task. So since I'm doing date, I'm not going to do task. And then I'm going to specify who I want this message to be sent to. I need to specify at least one recipient, otherwise there's no one to send it to, but I can do more if I want to. And I can do it based on all of these criteria here. I can specify it based on the person's role on the transaction. So maybe I want this to be sent to, say, the attorney and maybe then also the escrow officer, okay? And then maybe I probably wouldn't do this whole combination, but just to show you the different options you've got here, maybe also the listing agents on the transaction, okay? And then maybe also Pam. Okay, all righty. And then I can save that template. And now that's saved. If I expand it, I can see that that's my schedule there. So that was scheduling it based on a date. Let's remove that so we can see how scheduling it based on when a task gets completed works. So let's say I were to want this message to be generated whenever on the closing residential buyer checklist, the commission deposit receipt is completed. Okay, so now whenever this task is completed on a transaction, then this message will get triggered, okay? And so just again, to clarify, this is always based on the activity on the transaction. So you're setting these triggers for when a transaction meets those criteria, Okay. And when it does, a message will be triggered on that transaction as though you've gone to the transaction and created it yourself manually. Okay. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and save that template. And so now I've got this. So now, once it's scheduled, the system is going to monitor when it's time for the message to go out. Then, once that milestone you've specified has been met on a transaction, you'll be notified via email that a message was generated for that transaction, and that it's waiting for you to review and send in your scheduled message queue. So let's first take a look at what that message looks like, that email looks like, that you would receive. Something like this: new scheduled message awaiting your action. The following scheduled messages were triggered today and waiting for your review. Click here to review and send them, right? You've got a little snippet of what they look like down here, but the main thing is you've got the ability to, from this message, click through and then be taken to your scheduled messages page, right? So that's the quickest and easiest and probably most likely workflow that will get you here, is clicking from your email. But you've also got the ability to just manually navigate here, right? I could have gone to personal profile like I did before and then just click scheduled messages, actually like I just did a moment ago. Also, whenever I log into my account, pulling this over here, whenever I log into my account, you probably saw this at the beginning of the webinar, I'll have this yellow message that reminds me, hey, you've got some messages waiting for your review, and you can click to get there from that link, right? Super convenient, making sure you don't miss those messages. Or I could even make a bookmark, right? A bookmark that I put up here to get to my messages quickly if I want to go there regularly, if I send out a lot of automatic messages, etc. Okay. So once here in my scheduled messages queue, this scheduled message list is your convenient starting point for just making sure, or it's a convenient place to jump off from to send all of your messages, right? It's where all of your messages always live. You don't need to, again, remember to trigger them or generate them. They're just all here in this nice convenient list for you, okay? So once here, you can see that you've got all of your messages that are waiting to be queued, some of which obviously have got some errors here, but you can see your subject, who it's destined to be sent to, the scheduled date, and which transaction triggered that, okay? And from here, you can view it. Let's start with one of these ones that does not have an error. You can view it by either clicking the subject or the little eye icon. They do the same thing to expand this so that you can see the contents within and see all the information, including which template generated it, what the trigger was that caused this to be created, right? This task name was completed. Well, this is the name of the task. It's generic or test database, but you get the idea, the name of the task that was actually completed. And if it all looks good, you can go ahead and click send to send it, right? If you've changed your mind and this really doesn't need to go out, you can click to delete the message, right? Or if it needs some changes, some tweaking, something has changed since then or something, you can go ahead and edit the message, make any changes you need to, including adding more recipients or removing recipients, right? Complete flexibility at that point to go ahead and change the message. Okay. And then when you're good with it, save it and send it out if it's ready to go. Okay. So let's take a look at these few that have error messages here. I'm bummed because I had one that had no recipients, meaning that I specified probably a role that the message was supposed to go to, but that role didn't exist on the transaction, right? So the system didn't have anyone to send it to. But I accidentally added a recipient and now I can't save it. But anyway, if you didn't have a recipient, that would be a fatal error. So you get an error here that says there are no recipients. This particular one says that one or more recipients could not be added. There is still at least one recipient on there, right? This person. But some other role that I specified was not able to be determined. So it's just kind of alerting you of that. Alrighty. So taking a look at this one with the error. No listing agents were found on this transaction. That's one of the recipients that was designated on the template. If I'm fine with that, then I can just go ahead and still send it if I want to. If I want to edit it and add another recipient manually, I could do that. Frankly, if I wanted to go back to the transaction and correct any of these errors, like a listing agent missing or some autofill tags are missing. I think I've got one here that's only missing one message tag, hopefully. Where did it go? There it is, selling agent full name. So let's go ahead and go to Kirkland and edit the transaction and add a selling agent and save and come back. Actually, let me reload it. So it was Kirkland, edit that message, save changes. Okay, and so now it's good, right? Okay, so just FYI, again, go to the transaction, make that correction or whatever is missing, and typically you can just edit it, save, and it will refresh and be all good. Cool deal. And then once you're fine with it, you can go ahead and send it. So one note here, once the trigger or the milestones have been met on the transaction and the system detects that it's ready to be sent out, ready to be generated for you to take a look at, that triggering or that checking for whether a transaction has met the criteria happens each morning at 5 a.m., right? So when you come in the morning, presumably, unless you come in before 5, you'll have a nice notification message waiting for you, letting you know that there are messages waiting for your review to be sent. Okay, so just FYI there. Alrighty, so that is the first method of scheduling messages. The second method involves scheduling messages from transactions. Okay, so this involved prepping your message templates so that they're auto-generated and sent to this queue. Sending messages from templates allows you to draft them and then set them to be automatically sent later at some later time. So let's head over to a transaction. We'll go to this one here, right? And so let's say I am generating a message and I don't necessarily want it to go out at this very moment. Maybe I'm working super late at night and I don't want the person to know late at night. I just want to send it the next morning, or it's just more appropriate to go out in the morning, or maybe I need to have it sent the next day, right? Maybe based on activities that are happening. Or maybe I need it to be sent based on, again, relative to dates on the transaction, like on the close date or the day after the close date or the listing date, etc., right? I can do all of those when I'm scheduling a message from a transaction, okay? So let's say I'm on my transaction here and I can either type my message, or I'm going to cheat here or be efficient and use a message template, right? So I've typed out my message. I've specified, I want to attach the cover sheet and some docs that I want to be attached, and I'm sending it to this person, etc., right? Pending some tasks, etc., whatever I'm going to do. And then normally I would just send that email out. But now I've got the option to do pretty standard to be able to select on the arrow next to it to schedule that message being sent. So I'm going to schedule send. And I can specify an actual or absolute date and time. So let's say I wanted this to go out on tomorrow at 2 p.m., right? And schedule that send. Okay, so I could do it that way, or let's try another method. I'm going to schedule the same for illustration, right? Attach some items, do my thing here. And then I'm going to schedule this to be sent on a relative date. So relative to dates on the transaction. And this is the same relative picker that you've got when you're scheduling tasks to be due at certain times, but it's relative to, it's to trigger the message being sent instead of the task being getting a due date. Okay, so let's say I set this to be sent, again, let's say 2 calendar days after acceptance date, right? I can do whatever relative rule that I want to set there. Okay, then once I've set those, they're listed down here below. I can click, same as I could with the message templates, to preview them, either using the eye icon or clicking on the subject name or the subject. I can delete them. I can send them right away if I've changed my mind and I really want it to go out now instead of April 19th at 2 p.m. Okay. Notice it's calculating here the actual time it's going to be sent based on the rule that I specified, so I can see the actual date that ends up being. Alrighty. And the difference, or just something to note, between your message templates being scheduled and these transaction messages being scheduled, again, is that these are going to go out automatically. When you set up your message templates, you set them up based on rules and different criteria that obviously make sense, but warrant you previewing it before it goes out to make sure everything looks as if it should. Okay. But when you're drafting this message here, you're necessarily looking at it and drafting it here. So by design, you want it to go out as soon as that time frame gets hit. You don't need to re-review it. So general intention for when you're scheduling a message right from the editor. And that's it for the two different methods of scheduling your messages.